Maybe we should see other people. Just for clarity. Emily said it without flinching. Her voice was too steady, too smooth. It wasn't a question, it was a verdict. She didn't look up when she said it either. Just stirred her tea like she was reading a weather report. I remember everything about that moment. The faint scrape of her spoon against the mug. The smell of bergamot and almond milk. The light slanting through the kitchen blinds catching on her necklace. The one I gave her 2 anniversaries ago. The silence that followed her words stretched across the table like a fault line, splitting us in two. For clarity, she repeated, as if that word made it clinical, clean. As if clarity ever came from chaos. I didn't say what I felt, didn't push back. I just nodded, told her I understood, and took another sip of my coffee like we were having a reasonable adult conversation. But something broke in me right then, quietly, precisely, like the first crack in a foundation that won't show itself until the house begins to tilt. I knew what this was. She didn't want clarity, she wanted permission. Permission to do what she was already doing, or planning to do. A pause, with a predetermined ending. Still, I played along. Told myself maybe she was lost, maybe she'd find her way back. I wanted to believe we were just going through a phase. I wanted to believe that because it was easier than accepting the truth that had started creeping in through the cracks months ago. That evening, we sat on the couch together like everything was normal. She rested her legs on my lap, watched something forgettable on Netflix. She even laughed once, that bright, unfiltered laugh I used to live for. But it didn't reach her eyes. Her body was with me. Her mind was on someone else. Over the next few days, the air between us changed. Nothing explosive, just quiet withdrawal, like someone turning down the dimmer switch on affection. She stopped asking how my day was. She stopped lingering when we kissed goodbye. Her hugs got shorter. Her phone stayed closer. The worst part? She was still kind. Still made dinner twice a week. Still texted me cute videos of animals like nothing was wrong. That was her talent, making detachment look like maturity. Like she was doing me a favor by not breaking my heart all at once. One night, I heard her on the phone in the other room. Her voice was low, warm, and laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months. She said, "No," I told him. He took it better than I expected. Then quiet. Then, "Yeah, I think it's starting." I didn't confront her. I just sat there in the hallway, staring at the floor, listening to a version of my life unravel without permission. My chest tightened with a feeling I'd come to recognize, a quiet weight settling deeper than surprise. We'd built this life over 8 years, vacations, anniversaries, late-night fights that turned into early morning apologies. I was there for every new job, every tearful call from her mother, every dream she dared to speak aloud. I thought we were still building. But somewhere along the line, she had started packing. The next morning, she was all softness and casual ease. She wore my college sweatshirt while making breakfast, even kissed me on the cheek before heading out. It was a strange kind of cruelty, being treated kindly by someone who'd already let go of you. I could have pushed, demanded answers, but I didn't, not yet. Instead, I started paying closer attention, not to what she said, but to what she didn't. She thought I was going to drift quietly into the background, a placeholder until her exit plan was clean. But she didn't know me as well as she thought. I wasn't going to break, I was going to watch. It started small. Her phone usage changed. Not the frequency, that had always been high, but the patterns. She used to scroll in the evenings, curled up beside me. Now she was most active at night, long after I'd gone to bed. I'd wake up to see notifications, likes, comments, new follows, stacked between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. The glow of her screen had become her nightlight, and I had become background noise. She said she couldn't sleep lately. Too much on her mind. I nodded, told her it was probably just stress. But the truth stuck like a splinter behind my ribs. She wasn't restless, she was engaged. Energized by something I wasn't a part of. Then came the hotel receipt. It showed up on our joint credit card. Just a one-night stay at a boutique place downtown. I noticed it while sorting finances one morning. She had mentioned being at her sister's that weekend. Her exact words were, "Just need some girl time. Pajamas and bad movies. Nothing complicated." Only, her sister had been tagged in a photo dump from Charleston. Beach shots, cocktails, a location tag 4 states away. I stared at the receipt longer than I needed to. Not because I didn't understand what it meant, but because I didn't want to admit what it was confirming. When I asked about it, I kept my tone even, casual. I said, "Hey, random question, what hotel did you stay at when you were with Rachel?" She blinked, a beat too long. "Oh, I stayed with her. Not at a hotel." "Why?" I held her gaze for a moment. Let the silence fill the space. "Just wondering," I said. "I saw something come through on the card. Maybe it was fraud. I'll call them." Her smile returned too quickly. "Yeah, weird. Let me know what they say." Then she turned back to her laptop. The subject was closed, like it had never been open. That night, I lay in bed next to her and watched the ceiling as she turned away from me. She slept soundly beside me. I lay awake, thoughts racing, calm nowhere to be found. The rational part of me tried to intervene, told me it could still be innocent. A mistake. Maybe her sister had booked the hotel in her name for someone else. Maybe Emily had reasons she hadn't explained. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But there was something else beneath that thought, a colder voice. The one I trusted more. It said, "She lied." Smoothly, easily, without blinking. And that voice didn't go away. Over the next week, I noticed more shifts. Her new clothing tags in the trash, items I'd never seen her wear. She used to show me everything she bought, even joked about how bad she was at keeping secrets. Now she came home with new things, and I only saw them when they passed me in the laundry. One evening, she mentioned a work dinner, said she'd be home late. I didn't push, but I made a quiet note of the restaurant name. When she came back, I asked how it went. She said, "Oh, they ended up ordering into the office. Long day. Just easier." I nodded, smiled, but I already knew the truth. I'd driven past that restaurant on the way home from my own meeting. I'd seen the hostess unlocking the door at closing time. Empty tables. No one inside. Something was unraveling. And the worst part was how normal everything else stayed. We still had dinner together. Still watched the occasional movie. She still laughed at my jokes, leaned her head on my shoulder during reruns of shows we'd watched a dozen times before. But every act of normalcy felt staged. Like we were playing the roles of us, with no director behind the camera. That's what made it harder. If she'd screamed, I could have screamed back. If she'd walked out, I could have followed. But she was slipping away in silence, and silence doesn't leave a trail. So I started listening closer. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I didn't want to fight. I wanted the truth, and if she wasn't going to hand it to me, I'd learn how to take it. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the first real crack. I was making coffee while she showered. Her tablet buzzed on the counter, just a soft chime, a calendar reminder. The screen lit up with a glimpse of an email preview. "Just confirming the itinerary, R." That was it. Just the letter R. But something about the tone felt too casual, too intimate. Not the kind of email you send to a project lead or a team coordinator. Not that early. Not on a weekend itinerary. I tapped the screen, and the lock screen dissolved. She rarely logged out. Years of trust had made her careless. Or maybe she thought I'd stopped looking. The email was from someone named Ryan. Subject: "This weekend, can't wait." His signature matched the name she'd mentioned in passing once. "R from work," she'd said. Just someone helping her organize a logistics calendar for a new project pitch. Nothing major. I read through the message twice. There were no direct admissions, no obvious smoking gun. Just a strange warmth, familiar phrases, a sense of anticipation. That would have been easy to explain away, if not for the attached PDF, a resort itinerary, Friday through Sunday, wine tasting, spa reservations, a 2-person dinner reservation. She had told me she was meeting an old college friend that weekend. Girls' weekend. She'd packed light, worn perfume she hadn't touched in 6 months. I remembered because I'd paused at the doorway, watching her zip her bag, and said, "That's new." And she just smiled and said, "Thought I'd feel good for once." I didn't react right away. I didn't even close the email. I just stood there, watching the bubbles rise in the coffee pot, letting my hands warm against the countertop. When she walked in 10 minutes later, hair wrapped in a towel, she smiled and said, "You made the good blend." Kissed me on the cheek, poured herself a mug, and I just watched her. I didn't say a word. Instead, that night after she fell asleep, I started going through our shared calendar history. I needed to know if this had been going on longer. Something told me it had. It didn't take long. There were discrepancies everywhere. A networking event 3 months ago in San Diego, Yet her flight itinerary had her landing in Seattle. A conference she claimed lasted 2 nights, but her return flight was scheduled 4 days later. I started printing, filing, cataloging every inconsistency like an archivist of Betrayal. I wasn't just hurt, I was building a case. Not because I wanted to trap her, but because I needed to know just how much of my life had been rewritten without my knowledge. A few nights later, something else surfaced. She dropped her work bag in the hallway as she always did, casual, distracted, keys and sunglasses tossed on the side table. While she was upstairs showering, a small folded flyer slipped from the side pocket. I picked it up. It was for a creative empowerment retreat, redefining purpose, reimagining self, weekend intensive, one she never mentioned. And the kicker, it had already happened, 2 weeks ago. The same weekend she told me she was in Atlanta visiting her cousin. It even had a list of breakout sessions, claiming the next chapter: personal branding beyond partnership, romantic disentanglement, and identity recovery. That one hit hard. I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't understand what it meant, but because it confirmed something far deeper. She was preparing to live a life that had no room for me in it. And she wasn't struggling with that decision. She was celebrating it. That night, I sat in my office and pulled out an old notebook she gave me years ago. On the first page, she'd written, "For the dreams that scare you, chase them anyway." It was from our 2nd anniversary, back when she still looked at me like I was the future, not the past. I used to believe in every word she said. I funded her vision when she wanted to leave her job, paid for branding workshops, helped her build the website, ran marketing plans late at night, while she bounced ideas off whiteboards in our living room. We were a team, or so I thought. Now I realized she wasn't just leaving me. She was taking what we built and trying to pass it off as hers alone. But she wasn't moving in silence. She was leaving a pattern, and patterns can be followed. The email was old, at least 6 months back, buried in a forgotten folder she must have created during one of her spring organizing phases. I wasn't looking for it. I was cataloging financial PDFs, scanning receipts for anything she might have tried to bury. And then I saw it, a folder titled Miscellaneous Collab. I clicked. There were a few vendor inquiries, a sample invoice, and then a string of emails between Emily and Abby, her best friend since college, the one who used to laugh with me on double dates, send me memes, ask for my help fixing her internet when her router glitched. Abby had always been Team Emily, but I never thought that meant anti-me. I was wrong. The email's subject was pre-break thoughts? Abby had written, "You just need him to take the break, then you're free. No messy divorce talk yet, just space. He won't suspect anything until it's already too late." Then Emily's reply, "He won't see it coming. He still thinks I'm figuring things out. But Ryan says we'll be able to move once Q3 ends." Ryan. That wasn't just some fling. That was a transition plan. My hands didn't shake as I read the thread. My breathing didn't spike. That part of me had gone quiet. The part that reacted. What replaced it was colder. A steady pressure in my chest. It wasn't pain anymore. Just clarity. The kind that comes after too much noise. Abby knew. She had helped. The same woman who stood beside Emily at our vow renewal 2 years ago had helped her draft an exit timeline while smiling across our dinner table. She'd looked me in the eye and asked about our anniversary trip, while already knowing Emily wouldn't be joining me for the next one. There were over 24 emails, coded references, changed names, meeting spots. Abby covering for her when Emily missed a flight, or had a branding client emergency. She was the alibi factory. Every doubt I'd buried had been engineered. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. I clenched my teeth instinctively, the tension building like a tide I had no time to resist. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was strategic. It was choreographed. Ryan hadn't just appeared during the break, he'd been there months before. Integrated into her plans, integrated into my life, by extension, only I hadn't known it. That night, she came home humming again. Same as always, tossed her keys on the counter. Told me about some podcast she wanted to pitch to. Then sat beside me on the couch and put her feet on my lap like nothing had changed. And I let her. I let her sit there with the illusion of a man still fooled. I even laughed once, at something on the screen. She looked at me sideways, maybe surprised at my calm. But I wasn't calm. I was collecting. That weekend, she left again. Another networking retreat. I watched her go from the upstairs window, phone already to her ear as she walked to her car. I imagined it was Ryan, or maybe Abby, giving her last-minute cover lines. When she turned the corner, I walked back to her desk, opened her second laptop. Yes, she had a second one now. Just for creative work. I'd cloned it weeks ago using a remote keylogger she hadn't noticed. Every keystroke, every saved password, every login, mine. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was in control. It wasn't just one affair. It wasn't just emotional. It was a staged transition. From our marriage into her new identity. One that didn't include me, but was still funded by the man she'd replaced. She didn't want a clean break. She wanted a controlled narrative. One where she came out composed, mature, in control. But control is a delicate thing. And she was starting to forget who she was dealing with. It was a real estate friend who tipped me off. We were grabbing lunch, a routine catch-up, nothing more. I hadn't told him anything about Emily, not yet. But as he sipped his coffee and glanced at his phone, he said offhand, "Funny thing, I saw Emily's name pop up a few weeks ago. Someone from my office said she was asking questions about asset transfers. Real quiet stuff. Not her property though. Yours." I kept my expression flat. Chewed slower. "What kind of questions?" He shrugged. "Something about how to shift ownership on jointly held properties without triggering a flag. Very just hypothetically kind of vibe. But she left a paper trail. Odd thing to ask when you're not planning anything." I nodded like it didn't sting. But something cold settled in my chest. Back home, I pulled up our shared property documents. I cross-referenced them against a business registration database. It didn't take long. There it was, a brand new LLC, filed under her maiden name, with a business address that matched the P.O. box she claimed was for consulting clients. 3 weeks before our pause, she'd already started moving money. Small amounts, sure, nothing blatant, but they added up. Redirected transfers, reclassified as branding expenses, new accounts under business headers, a financial reorganization that looked innocuous on the surface, until you saw the pattern. I dug deeper, hired a forensic accountant, not to act yet, but to map the landscape. He flagged a few dormant accounts I'd forgotten we even had, savings accounts we opened before we were married, later merged. Except she had quietly reactivated one, just under the threshold to avoid alerts. Then I checked her emails again, more carefully this time, and found the thread with her attorney. Not her work attorney, a family lawyer. She'd reached out for a consultation before she ever proposed the break. Before the clarity conversation, that line about seeing other people. That wasn't a moment of uncertainty, it was the final step in a legal strategy. An emotionally palatable smoke screen for a well-planned exit. I sat in my office that night, surrounded by spreadsheets, printed emails, bank statements. The walls felt smaller, the silence louder. But I wasn't panicking. I was preparing. I took everything to my own attorney the next morning. A woman named Talia. Sharp, calm, unshakable. She glanced through the materials, her eyes scanning like a surgeon before the first incision. When she looked up, she said, "She's staging for a favorable divorce narrative, wants to control the optics, reframe the assets as separate ventures, and position herself as the one blindsided by distance. It's an old play, but she's underestimating your ability to document." "I want to file first," I said, quietly, but decisively. Talia nodded once. "Then we start now. Your strength is your evidence, and your silence." Over the next week, we built the foundation. I closed vulnerable accounts, pulled my name from anything she had linked to her new LLC. We drafted the filing language carefully, not accusatory, but direct. No claims of misconduct, just irreconcilable differences. Clean, elegant, legal armor. By the time Emily returned from her weekend retreat, everything was in motion. She walked in like she'd conquered something, smiling, glowing. She mentioned a possible sponsor for her brand, said she'd found real clarity. I smiled back, told her I was happy she felt good. We even had dinner that night, stir-fry and wine. She lit candles like she used to, almost romantic. She had no idea the papers would be served 2 days later. She'd planned a clean escape, a quiet pivot into a new life, but I had turned every one of her moves into landmines. She came home with a bottle of Pinot and that loose, easy smile she used to wear back when things were real. "I thought we could relax tonight," she said, holding the wine like a peace offering. "Just you and me." No heavy stuff. She poured 2 glasses without asking, handed me one, then curled into the corner of the couch like it was any other Thursday. As if she wasn't weeks into coordinating her exit. As if she hadn't just returned from another long weekend with Ryan at some retreat. She never intended to explain. She asked how I was doing, how work was, if I was sleeping better. I nodded, said I'd been making progress, which was true, just not in the way she thought. I set the wine down without drinking, then stood, walked to the hallway, and came back with a single black folder. No theatrics. No big speech. I just placed it on the coffee table between us and sat down. The room seemed to shrink as the seconds stretched. "What's this?" she asked, one hand still on her wine. "Clarity," I said. She hesitated, then opened it. The first page was a printout of her emails with Abby. I'd highlighted the line, "He won't see it coming." She blinked. The muscles in her face twitched, barely perceptible. She turned the page. There were the messages from Ryan. The travel itinerary. The photos from the hotel she said she'd never been to. Next came the bank records. Redirected payments. The business registration under her maiden name. The consultation email with her lawyer, dated 2 weeks before our pause. And finally, the draft of the divorce petition I had already filed, signed and time-stamped. She didn't speak for a full minute. Just flipped through the pages like she couldn't recognize the life on them. Or maybe she was just realizing how meticulously I'd watched her build this lie. When she finally looked up, her voice cracked. "I can explain." "No," I said. "You can't." She swallowed, her posture collapsing just slightly. "You were always so distant, I didn't know how to reach you anymore. You were too stable." That word, stable. As if steadiness was a flaw. As if showing up every day, loving her consistently, sacrificing quietly, was something to apologize for. "You used my loyalty like a tool," I said. "And when it got in your way, you rebranded it as indifference." She looked away. Her hands were trembling now. "I didn't expect you to find out like this," she said. "No," I replied. "You didn't expect me to find out at all." She sat back, stunned. Not from the volume. I hadn't raised my voice once, but from the finality in it. I wasn't angry in the way she had prepared for. I wasn't broken. I wasn't begging. I was done. "You said you wanted clarity," I told her. "So I gave you some." I stood, picked up my glass, and turned to leave the room. Before I crossed the hallway, I looked back once, not out of affection, but out of recognition. There's no seat waiting here anymore. I slept in the guest room that night. Not because I had to, but because I wanted the last hour of silence for myself. Not the version she'd curated. Not the version she'd rewritten. The real one. 2 weeks after she moved out, the internet caught up with her. It started quietly, just a photo. A mutual acquaintance from a marketing firm posted pictures from a so-called leadership summit in Northern California. One of those sleek, invite-only events full of personal branding consultants and mindfulness coaches. Harmless, on the surface. But in the 4th slide of a 10-photo carousel, there she was, Emily, sitting under a pergola, legs crossed beside Ryan. They weren't doing anything overt. Just leaning in close, laughing like no one else existed. But in the world they worked in, optics mattered more than actions. The problem? Ryan's long-term partner, a VP at a competing firm, saw the post. And she didn't just seethe quietly. She sent the images directly to Ryan's company's ethics board. Within 48 hours, Ryan was terminated. Breach of conduct, conflicts of interest, compromised confidentiality from a known competitor relationship. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about the paper trail. Emails, shared proposals, deleted messages recovered by internal IT. And Emily? She wasn't employed by a corporation, but her brand, the one we had spent nights building in our living room, was about to debut at a major pitch event. Investors, panel judges, the entire curated image of a grounded, inspiring female founder, gone. Within a week, 3 of her scheduled appearances were cancelled. One investor quietly pulled funding, then another. Nobody released a statement. They didn't have to. In her industry, silence is reputation death. And Abby, loyal Abby, was caught too. IT logs showed she'd used company resources to coordinate bookings, documents, even some of the retreat content. HR let her resign quietly. No blow-up, just erasure. It was almost too poetic. What began as a calculated exit strategy became a cascade failure. Not because of me. Because of her own hubris. She built her escape on secrets, and secrets have weight. Eventually, they fall. She reached out once. An email. No subject line. Just one line in the body. I didn't expect this. Please, can we just talk? I didn't respond. There was nothing left to clarify. No conversation would rewrite what she'd done, and I didn't need closure. I already had it, printed, signed, and filed.